Dickens novel, Great Expectations. I think most people would say that it is his masterpiece, though close seconds are Bleak House, which few foreigners, and I know Koreans, have heard of, but they should read it. Close second, I would say. David Copperfield, close third. In that order, the three best, I think. Okay. Dickens was born in 1812, died in 1870. He wrote this novel in 1861. It came after some unsuccessful works of his, and so he was eager to reinstate himself, rebuild his reputation as the greatest living novelist in English. And so I think this novel was important to him. It's also quite personal. Let me say from the beginning that it is a gloomy work. Now, most people don't think of Dickens, most people don't associate gloom with Charles Dickens. People think of the bizarre, eccentric, comical, or semi-comical at least, characters whom Dickens created. Some seriousness, of course, say in Oliver Twist, the poorhouses, pretty terrible. Some terrible poverty, violence in that poverty. Dickens' Christmas Carol, some poverty there and some suffering there. But mostly Dickens' sentimentality carries the day. I think in Great Expectations, sentimentality does not carry the day. It is a gloomy work. Okay, the main characters. First, the narrator is Pip. Philip Pirrip is his real name, but he's Pip throughout. Now, he narrates this story, and really it's autobiographical. That is, he claims to be telling about his own life. At the time of his telling the story, he's about 35 years old. That means that this novel qualifies as what is called a Bildungsroman. Bildungsroman. Capital Bildungsroman. German word. Bildungsroman. Roman is novel. Bildung comes from the verb bilden, a little bit similar to our build. That's where our build came from. A Bildungsroman is the story of the formation, which is what Bildung really means, the formation of a character, of a person, how a person became the person that he or she has become. And this is really one of the better ones in the European or European-American tradition. Okay, Pip. I'll tell you other characters as they appear. The novel is 59 chapters long. Like all Dickens novels, it was written in parts, published in some literary magazine or newspaper, part by part by part. A serial novel, so that the readers would read, respond, be eager to buy the next installment, and so forth. And that's how Dickens made quite a lot of money. Okay. In chapter 1, Pip says that he was about 7 years old, 7 or 8, I'm not sure. He lived in a small town fairly near the coast of England, the eastern coast, I think. And that area was marshy, full of marsh. That is kind of like swamp. Damp, unhealthy too. Marshes, swamplands, that's where diseases breed. Malaria, for example. It's also where people easily catch cold and never recover. Pneumonia, things like that. Okay. Pip was an orphan, and in the opening scene, he's visiting the cemetery near, but not very near, his little village. One imagines his village remote, withdrawn from the coast by, I don't know, 2 to 3 miles, 5 or 6 kilometers, let's say. So the church is a mile from his town, let's say, and he goes sometimes, apparently, to the cemetery to sit and think and look at the tombstones of his parents and his 5 brothers, all of whom are dead. Seems gloomy enough. Always when Pip tells the story, though, Pip Dickens, there's almost always a little levity, a little light note, a little humor, almost always. But still, it's a gloomy book. Okay, so he's looking at the tombstones, gazing at them, and suddenly a man 40, 30, between 30 and 40, leaps out from behind these tombstones and grabs him. This man is dressed in rags, and not many rags. He's also got a chain on his leg, maybe even one on his arm too. What this means is that he is an escaped convict, having escaped from a prison boat, which was always off the coast near the town, and a scary man. Though even he's not totally scary, because this is Dickens. His accent, for example, he calls himself a convict. The V sound he can't make. V becomes W. So he asks, but rather commands, Pip to go and get him some victuals, and even victuals is kind of dialectical, meaning food, to steal or whatever, and to bring back also a file so that he can file off the chain from his leg. Okay, Pip, little boy, is terrified, of course. The man even turns him upside down and holds him by the feet at a certain point, and that scares him a little, though the way Pip tells the story is amusing. A little amusing anyway. But Pip is scared, and this convict, who for the rest of the book is often called my convict, also threatens that if he doesn't come back with food, or if he betrays Pip, that is, if Pip betrays him by reporting to the police or something, that the convict will kill him and all of his family, and if the convict doesn't, then a mysterious friend of his, somewhere near there, in the cemetery, will find him and kill him. Well, Pip is terrified. Pip leaves, runs to do what the convict asked him to do, or told him to do. And on the way, he sees another man dressed exactly like this man, that is, another escaped convict, ducking among the tombstones. And so Pip assumes that this other man is the mysterious second convict who will kill him if Pip doesn't bring back the food and the file. So Pip goes to his home, and now we learn about his home. Pip is being raised by an older sister who's called Mrs. Joe, because she's married to Joe Gargery, Gargery. And Joe Gargery is a wonderful human being. Unfortunately not entirely believable, because he is so wonderful. Mrs. Joe, though, is a violent woman, and she's always threatening to get out the tickler, a stick, and often hits Pip with the tickler, and she hits Joe also. Now, Joe is a blacksmith. Blacksmiths have to be powerful people, and Joe is a powerful man. He can hold iron up and hit it with that heavy hammer. But Joe is afraid, or seems to be afraid, of Mrs. Joe too. So their home environment is a little bit scary. It's described with humor, always with humor, and Joe is kind of simple-minded. He can't read or write, or he can only write his own name. He's pretty good at being a blacksmith. He's the blacksmith for the small town. And so they are comfortable, not rich at all, but comfortable. But Joe and Pip are more friends than adult-child, because Joe is kind of like a child. And Joe protects Pip as much as he can, always warns Pip when Mrs. Joe is violent, and their relationship is wonderful. Joe is like a friend, also like a father to Pip, but more friend than father. Joe is a kind, gentle, loving, entirely good man. Okay, if he's believable. Okay, so Pip goes home, and Mrs. Joe has the tickler. Mrs. Joe has been worried about Pip. Mrs. Joe always complains that she has to raise Pip. And this is why she often hits Pip. By the way, Mrs. Joe always wears a heavy apron. And this apron is kind of a symbol of Mrs. Joe. Dickens uses symbols. I would say it symbolizes her, the tickler does too, but the apron symbolizes her in that she uses it to keep people away from her. She will not let anyone be near her, her husband included. They have no children, and we realize that they have no married life, really, that they have no children and will never have children. In that sense, that heavy apron is the symbol of Mrs. Joe. So Pip returns home, and Joe warns him that the tickler is out. Tries to hide him. He comes through the door, but there she is waiting behind the door. Takes a swing at, hits Pip a couple of times, and Pip and Joe huddle next to the fireplace while Mrs. Joe complains about having to raise Pip, about having to take care of these two, Joe and Pip, and so forth. But after a while she calms down, and Joe and Pip talk a little bit by the fireplace, which is always wonderful, very nice. But then Pip's conscience is bothering him a lot, because after all, first he must steal food, and second he must steal a file from Joe, which is what he does. During the night, he gets up, steals a pork pie. British still eat these things, like stew pie with crust over it, and goes into Joe's blacksmith barn and steals one of Joe's files there. Runs out in the middle of the night to the cemetery. The convict is waiting there. It's a cold night. All nights are cold probably there. And the poor man has nothing on. But he's tough and strong. He eats the pie right away very quickly. Takes the file. Uses the file. And Pip, who is a very decent guy after all, says, while watching the man, "I hope you enjoy the food." Those words make a huge, profound impression on this convict. They change his life. But also, while he's eating and filing, Pip says he saw the other convict. Right away, our convict is violent. He said, where did you see him? What did he look like? Describe him. And he realizes that that second convict is his enemy, whom he hates more than anything. Later in the book, we'll find out why. The man's name, the other convict's name, is Compeyson, Compeyson. Okay, the violence of the man's temper frightens Pip, of course, but in the end, the man thanks Pip, and Pip returns home. His conscience is still bothering him, though, because he stole the pie and the file. The next few chapters tell us more about Pip and Pip's life. It turns out that Mrs. Joe had made the pork pie because a minor character, Mr. Pumblechook's birthday was the next day. Mrs. Joe seems to be very fond of Mr. Pumblechook, who is a relative of Joe's, and she can't understand where that pie disappeared. The police soldiers come, and they want to find the escaped convicts. Well, this makes poor little Pip just cringe, just cower in fear of being found out, of being discovered as having helped the prisoners, but nobody thinks of Pip, and so the danger passes. Around chapter 9, we meet maybe the second or third major character in the book. Her name is Miss Havisham. Havisham. She must be about 60 years old, but she is Dickens' eccentric. She is so eccentric. What happens is this. She asks Mr. Pumblechook to send Pip to her house. Now, Miss Havisham has a lot of money. She lives in a village 10 miles away. I don't know how far. And so Mr. Pumblechook takes Pip there. We don't really know why Miss Havisham has sent for Pip, but she sends for Pip. On his visit there, he learns all about Miss Havisham. By now, Pip is about a year older, let's say. Now, Miss Havisham had fallen in love and was to get married on a certain day 35 years earlier. On that day, the man who was supposed to marry her, no, that's too much, but maybe 25 years earlier, let's say, the man who was supposed to marry her did not come to the church. She was so humiliated, she was so hurt, so bitter because of this experience, that she is determined to punish all males if she can. And so her house is very strange, because she has kept her house exactly the way it was on her wedding day. And the wedding cake, and the wedding napkins, and the chairs, and everything in her house is exactly the way it was that day 25 years earlier, a long time earlier. This means that the wedding cake is terrible, is rotten, is disgusting. That bugs come around and eat the thing. That mice come around and eat the thing. Miss Havisham still wears her wedding dress. Strange woman. Very strange. But the depth of her feeling, of her pain, of her bitterness, goes beyond Dickens' cute. This is not cute. This is a woman who is so vindictive wants revenge, so vindictive that her feelings are deep, deep, deep. So when Pip visits her there, he also meets two other major characters. One is a girl his age, say 8 years old, very pretty, and she scorns Pip as a common boy, a blacksmith, a common boy. And this scorn of Estella is her name. You know, I must be wrong about age. Let's say Pip is about 11 by now. That's much better, not 8, 11. He's about 11 by now. The scorn that she treats him with hurts Pip deeply, stings Pip, humiliates Pip, and it changes his life. So that he wants to impress this girl. He suddenly becomes dissatisfied with his life. He's dissatisfied with being the son of a blacksmith. He's dissatisfied that he is supposed to become a blacksmith himself. He's dissatisfied with Joe and with Mrs. Joe. Dissatisfied with his life and who he is. It changes his life. The second major character whom he meets is a pale boy. And this pale boy is very strange. As Pip walks through the courtyard, one of the courtyards of Satis' house, where Miss Havisham lives, this boy says, "Come and fight me." He's a friendly, nice, gentle boy. And Pip says, "Fight you? Why? Come, fight me." Well, Pip is a little bit strong because he has worked with Joe. He's short, but a little bit strong. So he hits the boy. Down goes the boy. The boy gets right back up. "Come on. Come on. You haven't hurt me. I'm going to hurt you." Pip hits him again. Down goes the boy. Many times, down, 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 but always the boy enthusiastically jumps right back up. Now his face is bleeding, he's bruised, but he doesn't seem to feel it. "Come and fight me." And Pip finally says, "No, I won't fight you anymore. This is ridiculous. Go away." And Pip leaves. These three characters, Miss Havisham, Estella the girl, and this mysterious pale boy, will be with us to the end of the novel. Okay. Pip continues to visit Miss Havisham because Miss Havisham likes for him to tell her stories. And even in these visits, his English improves. Miss Havisham doesn't want to educate him really, but his English improves. But along with this, his dissatisfaction with his life. And this is terrible, because this makes him also dissatisfied with Joe. He's embarrassed that Joe is illiterate. He's embarrassed that Joe is uneducated, that Joe is so common. This is a tragedy, because Joe is a saint. Joe is such an excellent human being that no human being could be. And for Pip to be embarrassed by Joe is a terrible thing. Now, we know that it's terrible. Pip knows that it was terrible too, because Pip is telling the story, of course. So when he tells this, he's embarrassed that he felt that way. He's embarrassed about his changed attitude toward Joe. Next, we meet another major character, Biddy. Biddy is a girl about Pip's age also. And Pip decides to try to learn more at school. This girl tries to teach Pip because she's a teacher's helper. The teacher in the village school does nothing, absolutely nothing. But Biddy tries to educate Pip anyway. Meanwhile, Biddy falls in love with Pip. But for Pip, Biddy is simply a nice girl. But his mind is on Estella. Okay, he's young for this, we know. But the feelings go pretty deep. Okay, some time passes, and finally Pip is about 14. And Miss Havisham invites Pip and Joe to come to her house because Pip will be apprenticed to Joe. An apprentice is a young person who learns a trade, some skill, from some master. Joe is a master blacksmith. Pip will be an apprentice to Joe and learn the trade of blacksmith. Joe comes with Pip because Miss Havisham has generously agreed to pay the apprenticeship fee. Because naturally, when an apprentice learns from a master, he must pay some money to the master for teaching him. And that amount of money was 25 pounds. Quite a lot of money in those days. I don't know. In our time, probably Samshiman won is my guess. Not a little money. And Miss Havisham very generously agreed to pay it. But when Joe comes to the house, Joe embarrasses Pip tremendously in front of Miss Havisham and Estella. Poor Joe is not polished at all. He has no refinement, no savoir-faire, French, no knowledge of how to behave in society, in a social situation. He's just a crude, uneducated, excellent human being. Pip is embarrassed. And when Pip is embarrassed, we're embarrassed too. And Pip is embarrassed too, because he's telling the story. Okay, for the next 4 years, Pip learns to be an apprentice. He's embarrassed. He also tries to learn more and more from Biddy, to read, to write, to speak properly, and so forth. Then comes a strange day. Pip and Joe go to an inn. Joe goes there from time to time. Pip goes with him. Pip is nearing 18 now. And they meet a strange man who says that Pip's life is going to change. But then he disappears. Next, we get a letter. Pip has a benefactor. A benefactor is a person who decides to help, benefit. A benefactor. Pip has a benefactor who is going to pay lots of money so that Pip can go to London, get a real education, and become a gentleman. Suddenly, Pip's life has changed completely. Now he will not be a blacksmith. He will be a gentleman. Gentleman means quite a lot in 19th century England. Because 19th century England, like everywhere else, Korea too, was a caste, C-A-S-T-E, society. The laborer class, a caste, the gentleman class, a caste, and of course the aristocracy and royalty. Pip suddenly had expectations. The title of the novel, Great Expectations. This means that Pip suddenly was going to be a gentleman. Well, who is this benefactor who's going to pay lots and lots of money to make Pip a gentleman? Pip assumes that his benefactor is really his benefactress, T-R-E-S-S, namely Miss Havisham. Pip assumes that Miss Havisham is his mysterious benefactress who is going to pay lots of money so that Pip can be a gentleman and so that Pip can marry Estella, who is becoming every day more and more beautiful, just a beautiful, beautiful woman. This is Pip's idea. He doesn't know who else could be who else could have provided all this money. It must be Miss Havisham. And so with passion he becomes a kind of gentleman, does a lot of stupid things too, spends lots of money on clothes, he wants to be fashionable, of course, and his benefactor wants him to be fashionable too. Spends lots of money, learns how to drink and go to fine inns and restaurants, go to the theater, go to concerts, learns everything. By the way, he also will live, he will have an apartment mate who will help in his education. And who does this apartment mate turn out to be? It's the pale boy whom he had fought earlier. This is typical of Dickens. People whom we meet always turn up again. This boy's name, he's now a young man, is Herbert Pocket. And he's wonderful. He's gentle, he's kind. His way of correcting Pip when Pip commits barbarisms, when Pip commits solecisms, that is, when he speaks in a barbaric way, is so gentle, so kind. When Pip's table manners are terrible, so gentle, so kind is Herbert Pocket's way of correcting him. It's wonderful. And it turns out that Herbert Pocket's father was a very educated man and a relative of Miss Havisham, whom Miss Havisham has never treated properly because of her bitterness about her wedding day. Anyway, Pip will be tutored by Herbert Pocket's father. And so Pip actually lives with Herbert Pocket's father and his strange, eccentric family for about 2 years. Then they move downtown to a nice apartment. Pip is spending lots of money. He gets this money from Mr. Jagger, who is also a very important man. Mr. Jaggers is a lawyer, and it's through the lawyer that Pip receives all this money. He's a scary man, so without feeling, without emotion. People are afraid of him. He's imperious in his manner, that is commanding, and nobody disagrees or disobeys him. A man who is Mr. Jagger's helper is Mr. Wemmick. And Mr. Wemmick seems the same kind of man. Cold, unfeeling. But then one day Mr. Wemmick invites Pip to his home. And Pip is curious, so Pip goes to this man's home. Mr. Wemmick's home is kind of wonderful. It's like a castle, full of fantasy and imagination. And Mr. Wemmick is full of fantasy and imagination. In short, he's an entirely different human being from the human being who works for Mr. Jagger. Mr. Wemmick has two personalities. The cold clerk of Mr. Jagger and the warm-hearted, fanciful, affectionate, kind man in his private life. He takes care of his father, who is very old and very lovable, hard of hearing, and their relationship is just wonderful. And Pip goes there fairly often. He loves to go there, to the castle. Typical Dickensian supporting character. Okay, some time passes and we're 2/3 through the book now, when suddenly, on Pip's 21st birthday, he goes to Mr. Jagger, and Mr. Jagger tells him who his benefactor is. No, back up, no. One cold evening, it's raining, cold, Herbert is away on business or something. Pip is alone in his apartment. Knock on the door. Pip goes to the door. It's this kind of old man, maybe 60-ish, who speaks in this strange way and asks if he can come in. He wants to talk with him, with Pip. Pip doesn't like the man very much, doesn't trust him really. Not a very polished man, kind of distasteful, unsavory. But Pip lets him in. And the man's manner is very strange. Pip invites him into the living room, and the man looks at him full of affection. But Pip doesn't know him, and who is this man? And don't you recognize me? No, I don't. And he actually holds Pip's hand, maybe even both of Pip's hands, and says, are you sure you don't recognize me? And gradually, in this kind of first climax of the book, he reveals to Pip that he is Pip's benefactor. But who is he? His name is Magwitch, Abel Magwitch. And it turns out that he is the escaped convict whose life changed completely because of Pip's kind words. He escaped to Australia. He had no training for any work, so he became a shepherd's helper that has earned nothing. He spent nothing though too. And gradually he built up some money, bought sheep himself. More, was very good at what he did, raising sheep, wool, exporting the wool to England, and gradually, by spending nothing, he became a very wealthy man. Let's say this he did over about 4 or 5 years. No, it must have been, more than that. No, 7 to 18, so 11 years. He made a lot of money. And then he contacted Mr. Jaggers, the lawyer, and said, contact that boy, Pip. Jaggers was the man in the inn who was looking for the boy, Pip, and asked him questions. Oh, that's right. He gave the file to Pip. Pip recognized the file, and that's how Jaggers knew that Pip was the boy who had helped. Also, I guess he knew his name. The convict knew Pip's name, Pip. So, the convict has been sending lots of money to Jaggers. Jaggers gives the money to Pip. Pip is horrified because, of course, this means that his dream, that Miss Havisham had been his benefactress, that Miss Havisham planned for him to marry Estella, that his dream was an illusion. Illusion. Totally false. Pip is crushed. He is crushed. He tries to be kind to this disgusting kind of man because he is kind of disgusting. And also, he's kind of disgusted because this man basically had tried to shape and form Pip in the same way that Miss Havisham had shaped and formed Estella. Now, I haven't told you about that, so let me tell you about that. Miss Havisham had kind of adopted Estella, knew that she'd be beautiful, and gradually shaped her, that is, shaped her opinions, made her hate men, made her swear to punish men in any way she could, so that the vindictive Miss Havisham could get some revenge against men because the man had betrayed her. Her promised fiancé had betrayed her. In the same way, but with a different result, Magwitch had been forming and shaping Pip to suit his own image, to suit his own imagination and tastes. The tyranny of parents is one of the themes of the book. Cruelty to children is another theme of the book, and it's a theme that runs through all of Dickens' work. Dickens had had a difficult childhood for a while. He was happy in his childhood, but his father had been irresponsible. And when Dickens was 11, his father had been put in a debtor, D-E-B-T-O-R, debtor's prison for debt. And Dickens had been forced to get a job at a blacking factory. I don't remember what that means, but it doesn't matter. So he was torn out of the comfort and security and love of the family to be a little boy working for a living on his own. Dickens was scarred by that experience. And it caused him to be very sensitive to all treatment of children by parents. And he looked around and saw only mostly cruelty of parents to children. And this Oliver Twist, it's David Copperfield, it's virtually all. It's even, in a strange way, it's even Christmas Carol, because Scrooge had been raised by a harsh, unfeeling man too. Back to our story. McGwitch had risked his life to come to England about Pip's 21st birthday because he wanted to see him. Risked his life because if the British police or soldiers had caught him, they would have hung him because he was an escaped convict. So he risked his life. Now it turns out that Compeyson, the convict whom he hated, the convict who had escaped with him, Compeyson had a long history, and this is Dickens. Compeyson turns out to be the man who had betrayed Miss Havisham. Oh my God. But this means Compeyson must be about Miss Havisham's age. And this means McGwitch must be too. So let's say they're 50. Compeyson hates and fears McGwitch. McGwitch hates Compeyson for complicated reasons. They don't matter. But the danger is that Compeyson will find out that McGwitch is in England. Compeyson will tell the police will find McGwitch and hang him. Okay, the rest of the novel basically consists of the attempt to get McGwitch out of England safely. Pip refuses to take any more money from this man. The man dies in the end, trying to escape. Second thing that happens, Miss Havisham, Pip goes to visit Miss Havisham, and Pip shows Miss Havisham how badly hurt he has been, and how wrong, and what a terrible thing she has done. First to Pip. What has she done to Pip? Well, the reason why she had brought Pip from the little village to visit her home was to try to hurt him through Estella. And she did. And she really hurt him. And Pip goes to Miss Havisham to tell her what a horrible thing she had done to him, what a horrible thing she had done to Estella, how unfair it all was, and also she's been unfair to other people too, for example, Herbert Pocket's father. She realizes how wrong she has been, what a terrible thing she had done, and she tries to correct it a little bit. But with Estella, it's impossible, because Estella is already engaged to marry a bad, bad guy, whom Pip knows and whom Pip hates. This hurts Pip too, of course. Finally, in another climax of the book, when Pip goes to visit Miss Havisham kind of falls down. Oh no, Pip leaves, but suddenly he hears screams. He runs back upstairs, and Miss Havisham's dress, her ancient wedding dress, is on fire. Somehow it's caught fire by a candle or something. And Pip saves her life by taking his great overcoat, covering her with it, rolling over and over again with her, putting out the fire, hurting himself in the process with burns, saves her life, but she's badly wounded. But her physical wounds are not as bad as her emotional wounds, and soon she dies. But she dies trying to do some good things. She leaves money for Herbert Pocket. She gives money to Herbert Pocket so that he can establish himself in a business. Pip will later join Herbert Pocket in this business, and Pip will spend almost 14 years abroad, I think in India and Egypt. They build a small but good business. McGwitch dies, and we learn that McGwitch was the father, of course, of Estella. The mother is another minor character whom we meet, very strange. McWitch dies, he never knows about his surviving daughter. Estella marries this terrible guy, but the marriage doesn't last, but he hurts her. The novel has two endings. In one ending, I'm not even sure what the one ending is, but the other ending, which people prefer, is Pip, now 35, returns to England, mysteriously goes to visit Satis' house, Miss Havisham's house, and who is there also visiting that day? Estella. Estella, whose marriage has ended. Excuse me. This is getting Arctic cold in here because of this air conditioner. Who is visiting also that day? So they talk. Both of them feel their lives have been failures. They become a little closer to each other. What that means is Estella, who was trained never to feel anything, to be only cold inside, especially toward men, to be cold and contemptuous of men, starts to feel something. And there's a chance, we realize, Dickens throws his readers this crumb, this piece of little cake. There's a chance that the relationship between Pip and Estella might turn out, after all, that maybe they will someday get married, maybe even have children. By the way, when Pip was becoming a snob, key word in the novel, snob, that is a person who looks down on other people who are less wealthy, less educated, less refined, less intelligent. That's a snob. Pip became a snob because of his great expectations, gentlemen. And in that process, he basically rejected Joe and Biddy. It's terrible. And when Pip tells the story, of course, he tells it with remorse, with guilt. It's the best thing about the novel. His guilt. In fact, if anything, the novel is a confession of his guilt. But don't worry, a second climax of the story, after McWitch is with him, he becomes sick. And he's sick, dangerously sick, for about 3 months. Then one spring, let's say January to April, it's spring, he wakes up having been unconscious for a long time, opens his eyes. Who's there? Joe, who has been at his side, taking care of him for 2 months. Joe. Of course, Pip feels very guilty, as he should, but it's the best part of the novel. Okay, how does it end? Or looking back on it, why am I saying it's so gloomy? It's gloomy because the novel is about, in a sense, it's about people's illusions. And we all have illusions. We have these illusions about who we are, about what we are, about what kind of person we are, morally, in every way. After all, none of us see ourselves as others see us, but our illusions are huge. And our illusions are about the past, the present, and the future. At least that's what the statement the novel seems to say. Very few people escape these illusions, the novel seems to imply, but it doesn't go that far. But it's a fair statement to make. Pip discovers his illusions. The most terrible illusion was through his snobbishness, through his great expectations, his rejection of Joe. So, after he rejects McWitch, he spends those next 14 years looking back, living abroad, thinking about what he has done, writing constant letters to Joe through Biddy, because of course Joe doesn't write letters. When he comes home, after he visits Satya's house, and is it before or after? Must be before. That he's 35 years old now. He goes also to visit Joe. He thinks he's going to propose to marry Biddy. He wants to marry Biddy. Biddy is a wonderful human being. I guess Biddy is the second best human being in the novel, first being Joe. He goes to see Joe, and that day, it turns out, because Joe doesn't expect him, and Biddy doesn't expect him, it turns out that very day, Joe and Biddy get married. Oh my God, he almost proposed. Thank God he didn't propose. She's been taking care of Joe for years anyway. No, I must be wrong here. No, earlier, sorry. No, that's of course impossible. It's before he leaves to go abroad. Anyway, he goes to visit, let's say he's 22 years old. 22, 23 maybe. And they're already married. Whew. And it's right, too. Then he goes abroad. He's a bachelor. Lives alone. No, he lives with Herbert and his wife. Because Herbert's been in love and been married now for some time. But he's kind of a bachelor. Then he comes home, meets Estella at Sada's house. And we get this vague, unstated promise of a future match between Estella and Pip. Okay. Very good, if not great novel. Dickens, always a master of English. Too much sentimentality for most people, but 19th century. Thank you.